Welcome to All Things Financial. Trey Peterson and Yellis A. Coots, where we help you retire once so you can retire well. Join today for a leadership podcast on how to lead well personally, in your family, and in your workplace. It's going to be great. Welcome to All Things Financial, where today we're talking about true leadership. How do you lead yourself well? How do you lead your family well? And how do you lead in the workplace well? Yellis, I'm excited to talk about this because I think that leadership is one of the keys to building a great life. And one of my favorite quotes is, the hardest person to lead is yourself.
It's true.
When we talk about leadership and leading yourself, what are some of the things that you think about?
I think the word is just very loaded. It means a lot of different things to people. There's a whole leadership industry, but I think like when it comes down to it, leading yourself is one of the most important things you can do. Like if you become a person who leads himself or herself well, and people actually want to emulate that, that's way more important, and that's way bigger than just the title of leadership. Like somebody can give you a title and you can like, hey, obviously I'm a leader, I'm a manager in this department, right? But that's a very different thing than when somebody actually has leadership skills that they've developed that are earned because they've led themselves well.
Right.
And I think that like it kind of trickles into every area of your life. I think the difference, one of the differences between you and I is, you grew up as a pastor's kid. And I think that like you're just used to everybody being in your business. There isn't like, it's not like you have this one area in your life that's off limits.
Right. It's a glass house.
You don't segment things. Whereas for me, it's like, hey, I feel like I have all these different worlds, and like my worlds don't collide. They don't overlap. And a lot of times I feel like I can keep things separate. But in reality, like if you haven't led yourself well in some of the little things in life or some of the important areas, it kind of all spills into every single area for me. So I think that, of course, I'm sure you'll touch on leading yourself well and what that looks like for you, but I think that's definitely the starting point.
There's two types of leaders, as my business and our business coach talks about. There's basically a natural born leader and there's a situational leader. And I think the family that I grew up in was very strong on leadership, but football, wrestling, rugby, it kind of, put that inside of me. One's not better than the other. One is that it's naturally in you, and the other one is the situation calls for you to stand up and be a leader. And so one of the things I would say is, are you a naturally born leader or are you a situational leader? One of the posts I saw the other day, I think in relation to leading yourself, is it said, you can't read about push-ups. You actually just have to do them to have results. And I think life's that way. I think that we have a lot of people that are information heavy, and their ability to lead themselves and actually take action is rare. I think even, as running our company, we're in our 9th year of business. One of the things that we've noticed is there's a lot of good people out there, but to find somebody that's a leader is difficult. It's hard. Right? Not somebody that just shows up, but somebody that shows up. And Keith Craft says there's 3 types of people. There's those that do less than they're supposed to do. There's those that do what they're supposed to do. And there's those that go over and above. And one of the things that I was raised with is I'm going to be the type of person that always goes over and above. And I think that's something that you can have the knowledge of, but in the way that you lead yourself, you actually have to do that every day.
We have a number of employees that, like you said, whether they're going over and above, but sometimes it's simply just like how they interact with clients, how they, just the attitude that they have at work. It's not that they have a leadership position or anything like that, but all of that is in a way leadership. You're basically, it's a reflection of how the time and effort that you've put into yourself, the education that you've put into yourself, where whether it's reading books or just developing yourself, all of that is a reflection in just kind of like the normal routine tasks. Even how you send an email, right? If you take the extra time to engage the client in those things, at least in our world, in a professional setting, all of that's a reflection of how you've poured into yourself and the time that you spent developing yourself. Every little interaction. And sometimes, when you try to communicate these things to somebody who maybe isn't teachable, or doesn't really have that mentality, like it's almost tough to put it to words. It's like, hey, it's like these little things. And let me highlight these 10 little things that really just have, they show us a pattern and they reflect to us who you actually are.
Yeah. And I think too, some of that, you talk about like nature versus nurture, right? So there are people that just have it.
Yeah.
And there's people that have to develop it. And I think even if you have it, you have to develop the skill set.
Yeah.
But if you don't have it, you really have to be intentional to decide, before I lead somebody on my team, before I lead my spouse, before I lead my kids, I have to lead myself. And I think it's easy to give advice. What's difficult is to follow your own advice.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of leading yourself starts with the right habits. It starts with being consistent. One of the things that I've noticed is that we live in a generation where everybody wants to be a leader. Everybody wants to be a CEO, and they'll have 4 or 5, 6 companies on LinkedIn. they have a shoe company, they're an actor, they're a singer, they're a professional speaker, and they have, 4 companies that have almost no revenue. And I
Right.
think one of the things that you have to do before you to lead yourself is you have to find somebody worth following, and you have to be a great follower. And so one of the things I'm thankful for is that I grew up in a house that I was taught before you're going to be a great leader, you have to be a great follower. And I think one of the keys to leading yourself is to say, I'm going to find 1, 2, or 3 people in my life that have the fruit in their lives that I want. And when I need advice, I'm going to go to that person and I'm going to say, what would you do in this situation? And I'm going to listen to them, whether I agree or I disagree, but especially when I disagree, because the time that we need advice is when we disagree with the advice. Otherwise, we're just looking for somebody to basically agree with what we were going to do anyways.
And I think that that's probably something that like the natural born leader or somebody who has leadership instincts just naturally, that's probably one of their most difficult things, being a good follower.
For sure.
Because they have all the personality traits, they have everything that is like, hey, this person is tailor-made to be a leader, and it's probably the most difficult thing because with that comes hubris and ego, and it's really difficult to submit well to other people. But I think that just like you said, you can't be a good leader without also being a good follower first.
Yeah, I think the natural default of a naturally born leader is to be a maverick, which means that you don't align yourself with others. You don't have mentorship. You're just going to do what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And that's something that I know personally, if I hadn't grown up in the home that I grew up in, that would have been really difficult. And so I'm thankful that I was taught that through great parenting, but also through great sports, having coaches that, had the #2 wrestling program in the nation. Yeah. So leading yourself well first. So after you lead yourself well and you become the type of person that people want to follow, the next group of people that we have to lead is who?
Our families.
Our families. What does it look like to lead our families well?
Man, I don't even know where to start. Like, I don't think I could even give advice in this area. And just, for perspective, in 2019, I was a single guy. I had no immediate, obviously I had my parents, my siblings, but I wasn't married. I didn't have any children. I was living in an apartment. I was signing 12-month leases, moving from one place to another. And then at the end of 2019 in November, I bought my first home. In 2021, I got married, and now I have, 3 children, a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a soon-to-be 4-year-old.
Wow.
They're all in different seasons of life, not just because of the age gap, but, maybe because of that too. But, so we kind of have a little bit of a blended family, and it's difficult. It's difficult to say, like, and here's what I'll say. I think one of the insights that I have is in order to lead your family well, you have to be able to distinguish between like the small things, the small problems that everybody has, and some of like the larger things that come up, right? So like if your family, and every family to in one way or another is going to experience some type of crisis, right? And that's really where your leadership and your family's gone through a few things. But when you're going through that crisis, it's really easy to like not focus on any of the little things, the little persistent problems that have never gone away, have never been dealt with. Like the little things of like, hey, if I have a huge issue going on, maybe I haven't spent any meaningful time with my daughter, Grace. Mm-hmm. Or maybe like, hey, the problems that my son Abel has, like I haven't spent any time like talking to him about those and helping him deal with those things because right now we're putting out this fire. And it's the same thing, even in a work setting too. It's like, hey, if we're putting out a fire with one client, we might be totally screwing up and not answering something like an email, or maybe like looking at a service request and totally just like being late to do something. So I think that being able to zoom in and zoom out on the big problems and the little problems, and like not totally neglecting all the little persistent things that you always kind of have to have your pulse on. And I know for you, like the little things, like those
are the big ones.
Well, that's
the little things are the big things.
Yeah, they are. They become the big things.
Yeah.
And I know that for you, with your personality, you're kind of a big picture guy. You want to focus on, you want to tackle the big projects.
Yeah.
And sometimes those little things, like they don't just sort themselves out. And I think that that's a big part of leading your family well.
Yeah, I think if Steph said, I need you to take out the trash and then paint the house, like I would paint the house and then forget to take the trash out because I'd prefer to tackle the big project, So as far as leading your family well, we actually had a moment yesterday that I was like, okay, how do I lead in this moment? So I'm sitting in a meeting with a couple and that we've been serving for a while, and I get a text message from my kid's school teacher. They go to a Montessori, and it's to me and it's to my wife, Stephanie. And they said, can you please pick up your son? He just kicked his teacher in the face. And I was like, my sweet son, Cyrus, who's 8. They're like, please come get him. He kicked her in the face. And then we got there. My sister actually went and picked him up. And the teacher was like, well, he didn't mean to kick me in the face. He was kicking at me because basically he was saying like, I'm not going to go do this thing. And she had reached over to like grab his shoe and put her face where his foot was. And so she goes, I just want you to know he didn't purposely kick me in the face.
See, I don't blame your son at all for this. I feel like they should have a mechanism for handling an 8-year-old.
Oh my
who's
goodness.
kicking a little bit.
And I was like, thank God, because I didn't think he'd kick her in the face. But also he kicked at her, you know?
Yeah.
And then my daughter, who's 6, so the son is 8, daughter's 6, Tatum. They said the other thing is that your daughter had a rough day too. And they said, we basically allow them to have one snack between when they get to school and lunch so that they wait till lunch. And your daughter went to the lunchroom, grabbed something out of her lunch bag, and the teacher was saying like, hey, Tatum, you can only have one snack. That would be your second. And she looked the teacher in the eye and took a bite of the snack. And I was like, we are going to have a family meeting. So last night.
Natural born leaders.
Man, natural born leaders. So we sat down and I said, we're going to have a family meeting. And, we have them every so often, but it's been a little bit. And my son goes, what's a meeting? And I said, this is where we sit down and we talk about who the Petersons are. We talk about our core values, the way that we live and the way that we don't.
So you're already starting that at this age.
Yeah, we've been doing it for a few years, but it probably was happening quarterly, maybe only 4 times a year. And I'm like, we probably got to move this up to monthly. So we'll probably do like the first Sunday of every month, which is when Steph and I sit down, go over finances and things. We just talk about like, the Petersons, like our core values would be like honor, generosity, servant leadership, and then grit. So we went over those and I just said, one of the things I want to say to you, Cyrus, Tatum, and then Cruz, so Cruz isn't in school yet, but he's sitting there listening, is I said, when you walk into a room, you're not just representing you or Cyrus or Tatum or Cruz, you're representing the Petersons. And so I said, the Petersons were people that show honor. And so I said, when you're talking to a teacher, even when you're mad, you have to honor them because the Petersons are honorable. That's how we live. And I said, do you want to represent the Petersons as good kids or as naughty kids? And they said, we want to be good kids. And I said, well, not only do you represent the Petersons, not just your name, but you represent our last name, you're also representing Jesus. And I said, how did you represent Jesus today? And they both looked at me and they're like, not good. And so in our family meeting, I just said, here's who we are. Here's how we live. Today you were naughty. You're not naughty kids. You're good kids, but you acted naughty. And we separated the behavior from who they are. Yeah. And we just sat and talked about it and they listened. And what I loved is like they cared. I felt like they caught it. But I feel like a lot of families don't do that. So what I would say is as you lead your family, one of the things that my family did well too, and this as a dad, I'm a dad, we don't always do the right things. Like we make mistakes. And one of the things I'm thankful for is when my parents made a mistake or felt like they made a mistake, they would sit us down in a family meeting and say, hey, here's where we feel like we went wrong, or we disciplined you in anger. We're not going to discipline you when we're angry. We're going to wait because the Bible talks about, discipline your kids, but not out of wrath. And so the way that you lead your family well, in my opinion, is that you hold family meetings and you talk about your core values. You talk about what matters most to you and you talk about what it looks like to be a Peterson or a Coots or whatever your last name is.
Yeah, it's a really difficult thing because when I was growing up, I had a great support system. I had people that, for whatever reason, just people who I really respected, who decided to pour into my life and just like, they created some of those guardrails that maybe I didn't have like because of my relationship with my parents or whatever. But I keep thinking to myself, like, what can I tell them to actually modify their behavior? Because as a parent, every parent knows this. Like you're saying everything 100 times, right? No matter what it is, whatever behavioral modification you want to make, like you're going to repeat it 100 times. They're going to tell you that they're going to try to do better and that they really care and they want to be a better person.
Right.
But it just doesn't change, right? It's over and over. It's on repeat, the same thing.
Right.
And one thing that, when I was a kid, and I don't know if you ever thought this, but I always thought to myself, like, hey, when I become an adult, like things,
I'm going to do things different.
It'll be different. And like, by the way, I'm 12 or I'm 13 and it just seems like that's so far away, but things are going to change when I'm an adult. I'm going to be a responsible person. I'll take care of these areas that I'm really just kind of like I'm letting these things slide. And the thing is, they never change, right? Unless, and the easiest time to change and work on those things is as a young adult, right? Because the older you get, the more ingrained those habits are, or whatever that is for you. So I keep trying to tell the kids that I'm like, hey, it's not something that's going to happen eventually. It's not going to happen down the road. Like if you don't work on these things today, you're going to carry this into adulthood.
Yeah. The person you're becoming today is the person you're going to be the rest of your life.
But I do think that like with children, especially, obviously, you should lead your family and do, whether it's setting core values and those types of things. But I think there's an element where like a third party, somebody that isn't mom and dad, if the kids have somebody that they can turn to, that I feel like that person has, they just occupy a different space in that kid's life where they could speak into their lives a little differently.
I think it's the same for adults.
Yeah.
I was talking with somebody the other day and I was like, when you have a challenge or when you're making a decision, who do you go to? And this person was like, I go to my spouse. And I'm like, okay, well, they're not very far removed from the situation. And your spouse, isn't exactly like having success way above you. They're going to have the same perspective. Like, who do you actually go to? And, basically their comment was like, well, we're not making big decisions very often. And I was like, let me challenge you. You are. All the time you're making big decisions. How you talk to your spouse, how you talk to your kids, where you're going to work, how you're going to show up to work. And their response was kind of like, well, I don't have big decisions all the time like you do. And I'm like, actually, you have significant decisions all the time. And right now you're telling me that you have nobody that you go to. And one of the things that I've found is that most people don't have anybody in their life that has the ability to speak into their life when there's a disagreement. And I would say one of the things that sports did for me is that it taught me to have coaches in my life, not just in football, wrestling, and rugby, but in every situation of life. And a lot of times when it comes to building a business, almost all of my friends that are business owners would say that the best team members are ex-athletes. And it's because they spent years, a decade, maybe even more than a decade, learning how to be teachable and coachable. And not only are they driven, but they've been taught how to take advice.
Especially high-level athletes.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we run into people all the time that are athletes from high school, but there's a difference between somebody who's like worked at a high level,
right?
And they've had to find a way to make the teamwork actually work.
Right.
They have to be a team.
Outside of just having a skill set that they were born with. So that's what leading the family, looks like. I think too, one of the things I would say, lastly, and related to leading your family well, is family meetings are important. Having somebody that you look up to that has a great family and getting advice is important. I would also say, one of the things that's important when you have a spouse, and I got this advice a couple of years ago, was one of the things that we tend to do is we marry our opposite. And I read a statistic that said, it was like 90% of people marry their opposite. And the thing that attracted you to that person when you were dating is that they were so different from you. And then when you get married, the thing that irritates you the most is that they're so different from you. And so one of the things our business coach, Keith Kraft, says, is he says, a lot of times what we end up doing is we want our spouse to bring our strengths to the marriage. And he's like, if you know that they're not going to be who I am, that's what I bring to the table, and you appreciate who they are, that's how you improve your marriage. And it really helped me because naturally I'm a great encourager with my words, where I think my wife is an unbelievable supporter, meaning that she does all the difficult things that make me building businesses possible. But when it comes to encouragement with words, she's had to practice it. She's had to be intentional because she didn't come from a family where they were generous with their words. And because I did, I thought that was what's normal, and it's not normal. So what I bring to the relationship is the encouragement. What she brings is something totally different. And I've had to learn to be thankful for the things that she brings that I don't have instead of look for the things that I do have.
It's a tough thing because like most of the time we spend time criticizing ourselves, right? We're hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
Like we expect, we have a certain standard for ourselves and we judge ourselves by a very specific metric.
Well, let me just say this quick. What they say is we judge ourselves by our intentions and others by their actions.
Exactly. Yeah, but the other thing is it's difficult to change the metrics completely. It's like, hey, like I shouldn't judge this person the same way that I am hard on myself. I need to use a totally different set of standards because they bring different things to the table.
Right.
And things, by the way, that like we tend to overvalue what we bring to the table always and undervalue what other people do. It's just it's our natural.
By the way, that's in family, that's in the office, that's everywhere.
Everywhere.
Right?
Yeah.
All right, so that's family. How do you lead in the workplace? So John Maxwell's got a great book that I'm going to reread, but it's called The 360-Degree Leader. And what I like about it is it's not just written to the CEO of every company. It's written so that anybody can read it and say, not only am I going to lead well from wherever I'm at, whether I'm sitting at the front desk, whether I'm in IT, whether I'm a salesperson, whether I'm operations, because one of the things that you have to understand is that you have to lead yourself, and then you have to live in a way that you're pulling everybody around you up, and you're being a great follower. And so one of the things I would say is in your workplace is you don't have to have a title to be a great leader. In fact, one of the hardest ways I learned that, I've shared that I was, my wrestling team was number 2 in the country. In my freshman, my sophomore, and my junior year, I never missed a wrestling practice. I never missed a workout. I showed up early. I stayed late. Going into my senior year, we had a wrestling tournament that was just basically my weight class ended up just being two guys that were underclassmen, guys that, for 3 years I'd beat the tar out of them in the wrestling room. And I had an off day and I lost to one of them by a point or two. And I was so mad. And then I found out that my next match was with another kid on my team at my weight class. And I was like, I wrestled so bad today, I'm not going to lose to both these guys. And I was so mad. I did something that was out of character for me. I just left. I was like, I'm going home. This is a summer tournament. It doesn't even matter. And I found out at the wrestling banquet that I wasn't going to be a captain. And I found out years later it was because that one event I left, and the coach goes, I was so mad I decided that day that even though you were the hardest worker in the room, even though you never missed a practice, I was taking your captainship away because of the way you responded. And what I could have done is said, man, I was perfect for 3 years, and one moment ruined me being the captain of one of the top teams in the country. But instead what I decided is, even though I didn't get the title of being a captain, I'm going to be the best captain in the room. And I'm the one that messed that up. It wasn't the coach just being mad about it. And I think that's what leading in the workplace looks like, is you decide whether I'm a co-founder, the founder, whether I'm a controller, whether I'm a manager, I'm going to lead from where I'm at, and I'm going to be my company's biggest fan. One of the things I learned being at Apple Valley as a wrestler is I made our team sound like there's nobody better than us. Not just because we were winners, but because I was all in on being an Eagle. When we went to college at Oral Roberts University, I was like, man, I'm going to love my school more than anybody's ever loved it, and I'm going to take ownership of it. My first company, I go, I'm going to make sure people know that RJF is the greatest company out there. And I've done that whether I was in school, whether I worked for somebody else. And one of the things I think the Lord did is he saw that I honored those that I was following. And one of the things that's been great about our business is he's now brought some team members that are doing the same with us. Is they're like, man, I love what we do. I love this company, and I'm going to champion it. So if you want to be a leader in your organization, one of the things I would say is whatever your title is, choose to be all in and choose to be an encourager to those around you.
When I was thinking about being a leader in an organizational setting.
No, it's good. Different perspectives.
I'm worried that you're going to think it's a negative thing.
I might.
But what came to mind for me was blind spots.
Yeah.
I think that leaders naturally they have blind spots. Everybody has blind spots.
For
right?
sure.
Everybody has blind spots where it's it's the one thing that you just don't know, but everyone else thinks it's very obvious about you.
For sure.
But I think especially when it comes to being a leader in the workforce and in organizational setting, I think that the mistake is people think that blind spots happen because maybe you're not aware of something, maybe you're incompetent, or maybe you just you're not smart enough to see something. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's that. I think blind spots come from experience, right? Where it's you walk into the room, something happened, and you no longer ask the questions hey, what's going on here? It's more so hey, I've kind of seen this before. I know what's happening here.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of times, as leaders, we want to be the person with the solution. So something's happening and you just want to be able to bark your orders and you want to say, hey, this is how we're going to handle it. Hey, you do this. What did you do here? You got that wrong. You got to fix that. And what it does is it creates an environment where people don't challenge you.
We've seen a lot of leaders that surround themselves with yes people.
On purpose. Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Because
they don't want to be challenged.
They want to be the ones calling the shots. But
you're really good at challenging me though.
I don't know. I feel like we have a team member recently that has been challenging both of us a little bit more, and it's kind of highlighted hey, we actually need somebody like that. Yeah. So we've actually worked really hard to create an environment where people don't feel afraid to come to us. Not that we want them to challenge everything we say. They're not Well,
here's the thing on challenging. There's two ways to challenge somebody, not just around you, but even somebody above you.
Yeah.
Is when you have a problem that you see, a leader or the right person doesn't just bring the problem, they bring the solution.
Yeah.
And a critical person, they point out the problem and say, somebody should fix this.
Right.
Instead of saying, hey, I've been thinking, I think we have a gap, and here are 2 ways I thought that we could fix this problem.
Yeah.
So I think what we both appreciate about Kelsey, that's what you're talking about, is that when she brings up a problem, it's okay to be critical, but it's not okay to come with a critical spirit.
Yeah.
And what we love is that when she brings up a challenge, it's not from a critical spirit. It's from her saying, I love being here and I love this company and I think we can do better. And by the way, here are some ideas I have on how to fix it.
The other thing about her is she's naturally a problem solver. You look at all the problems she's already solved.
Right.
It's never from a place to just criticize. It's always because like, hey, we got to have a solution for this. So I think that, it's just important to know that we all have those blind spots, but really just to foster an environment where people feel comfortable, like
Bringing up
actually
challenges.
having a little bit of dissent from time to time. Like it isn't my way or the highway every time. Like, and I think sometimes as leaders, we want to like announce something very confidently. And sometimes that confidence alone creates an environment where people are like, oh, sounds like he knows what he's talking about. Let's just not say anything. So
yeah, I think the key though is to be repetitive. The key to being a 360-degree leader, the key to being a great team member is that when you're bringing up something that you're not doing it from a critical spirit.
Yeah.
You're bringing it up because you've brought a solution or you've said, here are some things that could work. They may not be the answers, but I want to work with you to fix this thing.
Yeah.
And so I would say, and I think you're this way too, it's like if a team member's always picking on things and they have no solutions, it's like, how do we get rid of this team member?
yeah, it's like the ideas guy,
100%.
just the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. What is? It's like they're always seeing the negative. But if someone's going, hey, I see a gap and I've spent the last week or 2 weeks figuring out how we could fix it. It's like, how do we promote this person?
Right. Exactly.
How do we elevate this person? Because we need them.
Yeah, we need them. We need somebody to call out those blind spots. Like I said, we all have them. And I think that we're in a position now where we have lots of people that feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Sometimes a little too comfortable.
So in leadership, 3 people to lead. Number 1 is lead yourself well.
Yep.
If you can't lead yourself well, you're not going to lead anybody else. Number 2 is lead your family well. Obviously, we would agree that if we live a successful life, meaning that we build a great business, but we lose our families, we've lost everything. Actually, one of my friends, Jonathan Brozazog, who's a great pastor, he said, when the Bible says, and I don't have the reference, that, you can lead the whole world to Christ, but if you lose your own soul, what does it do for you? He goes, I think losing your soul is losing your family, not getting your family to heaven. And so it's like if we build a great business or you build a great ministry, you build a great church, but you don't get your spouse and your kids to heaven because you didn't lead them well, you lost your soul. Kind of an interesting take. And then 3 would be, how do you lead well in the workplace? If you lead yourself well, if you lead your family well, and if you come with somebody that wants to add value but doesn't have a critical spirit, I think that's how you lead in the workplace. And what you do is you open the door to being promoted because your management, your leadership, they see that you're the kind of person that shows up and says, I'm all in. The last thing I would say is I'll never forget at Oral Roberts University, we'd gone up to the president's floor one day, a buddy and I, and the head of PR for Oral Roberts, he goes, hey, Trey, he goes, we've got some of the board of trustees coming, and I would like for you to give them a tour. He goes, because you love ORU. And he said to my friend, and I won't give you his last name, but he said, Dustin, he goes, you like ORU, but would you say you love ORU? And he goes, no. He goes, I like ORU. And he goes, that's why we want Trey to do this. And Dustin kind of laughed. But what I would say is you need to get in workplaces that you can go, I love being here. And it doesn't mean everything's perfect, but it means you go, these guys are doing, or these gals are doing a lot of the right things. I love their mission and I'm all in. If you can do that, you've got a bright future, not just where you're at, but wherever the Lord opens the door for you next.
And I think the only thing I would say to that is like, if you're somebody who chooses that, if you're going to be a part of this organization, you're going to make it better just by being there, then it's a mentality that you should bring with you everywhere.
Right.
Right. It should just be something that's what you bring to the table because, hey, if you're there, you're automatically going to make it better. If you're committed to that, then it becomes a lot easier to be all in on that organization.
What I would say is if you can't champion where you're at, it's time to move on.
Yeah. But I think it's mostly a you problem if I had to.
Oh, it is. Yeah. Great episode. Thank you for joining us, talking about leadership. Most of our talks are on finances. But one of the things that we believe is that if you're a great leader, that the money will follow.
Advisory services are offered through CG Advisory Services, LLC, a registered investment advisor, and through Guardian Wealth Strategies, LLC, a registered investment advisor. CG Advisory Services, LLC, and Guardian Wealth Strategies, LLC, are separate and unaffiliated entities. The topics discussed on this podcast are for educational purposes only and are not intended to be investment advice or recommendations. Listeners should consult with their own financial professionals before making any investment decisions.